Alright, welcome back guys, it's Mr. Ross again. Today we're going to go over day 2, week 4. As you can see, we're using a different method. This is called the square root method. I think you guys will like this particular method. The key here, I want you to take a look here, is you actually do not want to solve it the same as when you're factoring. When you're factoring, you want it to equal 0. When you're solving by the square root method, you do not want it to equal 0. You want to get the number that's squared, the variable that's squared, all by itself. So that means the number 1, we're already set. We've already got the x squared on that left side. But we do have a 4 in the way, so we're going to divide out the 4. And x squared equals 25 over 4. Now we don't want to simplify that because that's going to give us a fraction. But we do want to get rid of this square. So we take the square root. So x is going to equal the square root of 25 over 4, which is how you get the 5 over 2 answer that they have listed over here. Now the reason why there's 2 answers, well, it's at x squared, so there should be 2 answers. And when you take the square root of something that's squared, you don't know if it's positive or negative, so you have to include both. So that right there means plus or minus means positive or negative. So another way that you could write the same answer would be x equals 5 over 2 and x equals negative 5 over 2. Both answers are correct. And both ways of writing it are correct as well. Alright, look at number 2. You can see here we have an I answer. So let's figure out why we have an I answer. First of all, it's not equal to 0, which is good. We're going to divide out our 10. And we're going to get m squared equals, now this is 400 divided by a negative. Alright, so this time we're going to have negative, because it's positive divided by negative. Alright, it's going to be negative 40. Now, you've got to get rid of this m squared, so you take the square root. Well, you just took the square root of a negative, which we know is not a real number. So what that is that's an I, and you have the square root of 40. Now remember, it's a squared answer, so we have to include a positive and a negative, so that's where the plus or minus comes in. Then we have to break down the 40. Alright, what can go into the square root of 40? We have 4 times 10. Don't forget you have an I value there, and we have plus or minus in front. The square root of 4 is 2, so now I have 2i, the square root of 10, with my plus or minus. And again, the plus or minus simply means that one answer is positive and one answer is negative. And that's it. So I think a lot of you guys will think this is a pretty easy lesson today. Number 3, again, it's not equal to 0, which is good. We divide out our 16. M squared equals 1 over 16. We got to get rid of this 2, so we're going to take the square root. M is going to equal, the square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 16 is 4, but because it was squared, we don't know if it was positive or negative, so we have to include both. And remember that plus or minus just simply means one is positive and one is negative. Alright, let's move on to number 4. Now, remember what I said earlier. It cannot be equal to 0, but I've got this extra term here, so we're just going to move it over by adding it to the other side. R squared equals 69. Got to get rid of the 2. Take the square root of both sides. R equals the square root of 69. There is no square root of 69. And remember, the 2 means positive and negative. Now, I'm not going to write square root of 69 and negative square root of 69. I like to use the plus or minus symbol, but if you'd like to, you can write one positive and one negative. That'll be up to you guys. I will accept both answers. Alright, moving on to number 5. This one has an extra step again. You got to move this guy over. You want to isolate the m squared, so you add 6. Negative 5m squared equals negative 391 plus 6 will be negative 385. We're going to divide out both sides by negative 5. That must mean the answer is 77. Double negative is a positive. How do we get rid of the 2? We take a square root. And because we're taking the square root, we don't know if it was positive or negative, so we include the plus or minus and 77. 77 does not break down into a perfect square, so there's your two answers. Remember, the plus or minus means two answers. Number 6, same thing. You got to move this 2 over by subtracting it. Now we're going to have 36x squared equals 64. We're going to divide both sides by 36. X squared equals 64 over 36. We want to get rid of the 2 by taking the square root. X equals, well, the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 36 is 6. And I have my plus or minus. Now you'll notice that that answer is not the answer listed. That's because I need to do one more thing. I need to simplify. So what can go into 8 and 6? Alright, so we'll just divide out our 2. So we're going to get plus or minus 4 over 3 because we're going to divide out the 2 on both of them. Alright, 2 more to go. Alright, number 7 kind of has an obnoxious number there, but we're going to still solve it anyway. We're going to add 16 to both sides. So 18r squared equals 4,000 and looks like 50 when I add the 16. Divide out our 18. You're probably going to want to use a calculator. R squared equals, you have 4,050 divided by 18. Decent sized number. So we'll just use the calculator. I'm using one right here to the side. You can't see it, but 225 is the number. I don't know that off the top of my head. Now we're going to get rid of the 2 by taking the square root. So r equals, now unlike some of the previous problems, 225 is actually a perfect square. It's 15. But we still have to include the plus or minus because it could either be the positive answer or the negative answer. And remember, the whole plus or minus just simply means that one answer is positive and one answer is negative. And you can list your answer either way. Last but not least is number 8. Again, we have to clear the field. We've got to move our 4 over by subtracting it. 121v squared equals 64. Divide out your 121. V squared equals 64 over 121. We want to get rid of the 2, so we take the square root. V equals, well, the square root of 64 is 8. Square root of 121 is 11. Because we were a square and we square root, we do plus or minus. And again, as you can see with the answers, you can also list them out as a positive and a negative. So this is day 2's work. I think it's a little bit easier than day 1 because you don't have to worry about using factoring or the AC method. Pretty straightforward. Just remember that your plus or minus symbols mean that one answer is positive, one answer is in fact negative. Try the homework problems for day 2. If you're not sure how to do it, refer back to the video. If you're still having troubles, then of course look at my homepage for the Zoom chat hour and hop on the Zoom and ask your questions. All right, good luck guys. Have a great day.